Okay, hello everybody. This is What's Your Argument? I'm with Natasha again today, and she may have another claim for us. So I'm interested in getting into that. Is there anything that you want to introduce? I know that you're working on your YouTube channel now. So anything that you would like to introduce at all?
Yeah, I have uploaded quite a few videos since our last conversation. Um, Again, it's just an independent media project where I try to kind of dive into different subjects that I think are less discussed in society. I have a lot of different videos now with a bunch of different interesting guests, including you. We did a really good interview just about the concept of epistemology. It turned out great, and I was so glad to have you on. So, um, yeah, my channel name is MP Media, so you can find me there.
All right, MP Media. That sounds good. Yeah, it was fun doing that and being able to talk about SE, and then also I think I have to connect you potentially with somebody else that could also do an interview for you. So hopefully I can remember to do that. Um, but okay, so in terms of a claim, do you have a claim that you want to talk about today?
Yeah. I I typically tend to believe that the human species as animals are omnivorous, which I don't think is like really based on like an anti-vegan standpoint, because I do believe that everybody has their justification and beliefs and can live their life the way they want to. But for me personally, I do think that protein from animal sources is beneficial.
Okay. So I have two potential claims here. You can let me know which one that you think is better, which one you're interested in exploring. But one is that humans are omnivores, but I think the other one is that maybe we need to eat meat. Is that also fair, or would you not put it that way?
Um, I mean, I definitely believe that you can get protein from different sources. So I'm not sure if we would need to eat meat. I mean, obviously, people that are vegan are still alive and thriving. So I don't know if that would be a good claim. But I do think that that the human species is omnivorous.
Okay. All right, we'll stick with that then. So humans are omnivores, right? That
Yeah.
seems simple enough. Okay, great, great. Um, so my next question, this comes from Dolly, by the way. I thought this was a pretty good thing to integrate, so I decided to. But how long have you had this belief, would you say?
Um, I have never not eaten meat, but personally, I'm really not a fan of it. I could easily be either a vegetarian or a vegan. Probably not vegan because I think I don't know much about it, but I like vegans don't eat eggs or cheese or anything coming from animals, correct? I
Correct,
probably
yeah.
couldn't do that, but um uh yeah, I'm not like a big fan of meat. So I could be a vegetarian, but I'm not. So
Okay.
I've just my whole life I've had meat.
All right. Okay. All right. Yeah, I think that goes to my next question then, which is from 0 to 100, how confident are you the claim is true?
Probably as far as like a scientific basis on like based on like our gut, like the way that we can digest, or like what our body is meant to digest, and then like even like I think as far as like the way our teeth are shaped, I would probably say I'm at like a 78.
78%. All right. 78%. I'm not trying to throw a curveball here at all, but I wanted to try out, and I don't have to do this if you don't want me to, but I thought about actually writing down my own confidence in this, and I don't have to
Yeah.
share it with you. I can share it now, or I can share it at the end of the conversation. Is that okay with you if I do that?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay. All right. And do you want me to wait, or do you want me to share it now?
Let's wait.
Okay, let's wait. Great, great. Okay. So let's talk about some of the words here. So, I'm pretty sure that I understand what omnivores are. Uh, but I guess let's just, for the sake of clarity, would you want to clarify what that is at all?
I think on the general assumption of, like I had just mentioned, the way that our body can digest, either so like carnivore, herbivore, and then
Okay.
omnivore. So omnivore would be that we are able to eat both meat and plants. And I think
Meat.
that that's really a good um, assumption because our body is able to digest it. So I think from a science, we're obviously able to digest it. So I think that that's kind of like really solidifies my claim. And then also, I do think that if we were in a survival situation, I think I think that I think that humans from a long time ago probably ate meat to survive.
Okay.
As far
All
as the
right.
food chain goes, is what I'm talking about.
All right. Okay. Um, yeah, and I mean omnivore is an obvious word. I think we tend to know what that means. I thought maybe it would be something to explore. But yeah, so this idea of just this idea that we can eat both meat and plants, or that we're this mixture of carnivore and herbivore. That's kind of the idea, right? Okay. All right, so humans are omnivores. So let's talk about, is there anything that you could think of that would increase your confidence that this claim is true? This is again from Dolly. So I think it's a great question to ask, but
I think if I could probably look at the science behind our digestive system, I think that would probably be a good way to sway me either way. But I think really that since there's really still a basis, because I'm thinking about the fact that cows have, I think, 7 stomachs, you know? I'm just thinking on a scientific, like a biological basis that I'm pretty solidified in that claim that if our bodies are able to digest it and we do well after we eat it, that it's probably, aside from the morality aspect, I think that's probably a good assumption for me.
okay, great. Aside from morality, I think would be an interesting thing to explore at some point. Okay, so then what would decrease your confidence that it's true? If you can think of it. You don't have to answer this, so really.
Um, I'm really not sure. I get, like I said, I think maybe like if I could really dive into some research on the digestive system, and then possibly the fact, like maybe if a dentist could weigh in and weigh on the fact that our teeth aren't super sharp, but we
Hmm.
still do have our canine teeth. So I'm just kind of going on off of a layman type knowledge, without having to research it much.
Okay, yeah. So it seems like it's pretty much just uh biological information either way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm gonna try to do this. I think I can do this without actually revealing my confidence, which is good. But if you don't mind, if I could just share what would increase and decrease my confidence.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's the same thing. I think it's similar for both of us. I think I would want, either way, I would want to see that the biology is supporting that we're doing well while eating meat, or that we're not doing well while eating meat, or that we have predispositions biologically to eat or not eat meat. Like, yeah, I think it's pretty similar to what you're saying there. So,
Can you share your claim with, are you vegan perhaps at all, or you're not? Okay.
no, no, I am not vegan. I am not vegetarian either. So,
Okay.
yeah, you don't know my confidence level yet, but yeah, that
Yeah.
is where I stand on it. So
Okay.
we are in the same stance there. Not yet, anyway. I have been vegetarian, so I will say that I've been vegetarian. I don't think I've ever tried veganism, but I've definitely tried vegetarianism several times. And I am not one yet, but I totally could be convinced. Okay, so now you've already talked about the information, but maybe you have more. So I'll go over a couple of the pieces of information that you gave, and then you can add any more if you want to. But you were talking about how our digestive systems seem set up for digesting meat. Okay. And then teeth was another thing, right? So it seems like we have certain teeth that are designed to tear apart tougher things like meat potentially.
Yeah.
They're not they're not necessarily flat. Um, and then also there's this idea of like a history of eating meat. It seems in our history, it seems pretty clear. I'm sure you could find fossil evidence or this and that people have eaten meat in the past. So are all these correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would want to add in that into that? Anything else? Any other information that leads you to have your confidence in this claim?
Mm, no, not really.
Okay. We digest meat. We
Or I guess
have
maybe possibly just start like our on the basis of the food chain.
okay.
I think that we're pretty high up there, and it's just kind of like a survival type thing.
Okay. Let me put history first. So our history and up on the food chain. Or basically our place in the food chain, right?
Yeah.
Is that the
I guess
idea?
our place in the ecosystem a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. So we can kind of go one by one here. So the first one is we digest meat. So the reasoning here is if we digest meat, then humans are omnivores. If we digest meat, then obviously we can eat meat and therefore we're omnivores. Is that kind of the reasoning there?
I think from a biological basis, yes. Like if our body is capable of digesting meat product, I mean, I know that there's a difference in different people as far as like a health aspect, like is like like cholesterol and things like that,
Mm,
possibly. I know that everybody's different, but um there's obviously certain animals that cannot eat certain things. So I think on that from that point, I if since our bodies are capable of digesting it, I just feel like that logically makes sense that from a scientific standpoint that we are omnivorous, like within the literal definition. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, I do know what you mean. Um, okay, so in terms of digesting meat, I think the trick for me at this point is, I'm really trying to think of things that maybe we can digest, but we wouldn't say we're meant to eat that. And then also maybe some things, no, I can't. I think it might be impossible to think of anything that we can't digest that we should eat. Is there anything that like, one might I thought of bubble gum was first, but
Yeah, that's
that's
literally what first popped in my head too. Yeah.
right, right. Is that but I don't know that we should be eating that. So
Well, I mean, but you could think of it like on like about Tide Pods, how people were eating that. But typically if something's poison, well, I know not everything that's poison, but your body's natural reflex is to throw stuff up. So
right. Yeah, it seems like you can I guess that this might come down to a conversation about what digestion means because I'm wondering if you are like okay, like one thing I'm thinking of is like hallucinogenic mushrooms. That's one thing that I can think of that it seems like your body can digest it and it may even have health benefits. So even setting that aside and saying that obviously potentially really doing it too much is probably where it becomes the biggest problem. Uh, but we would say at some point it becomes not good for you to do. There may even be other mushrooms that are poisonous. And again, this is just kind of my ignorance about biology, but I'm wondering if you're digesting the mushrooms and you're dying for another reason, but your body is digesting them. Like your body's digesting it fine, but you're dying
mhm.
because of something else. And I guess that
Kind of like
just
just like a typical poison situation. Yeah.
Right.
Or even more relatable, because you know how some people like even like THC edibles,
Hmm.
people there's like that stereotype where people are like, oh, this isn't working, and they just keep eating more and more, but once your body digests it, they're like, oh man,
Yeah.
it's heavy. So yeah, I think digestion, I think that's definitely something that would be worth looking into, is kind of like the function of digestion, and how it, at what point is it within the digestive system that your body starts to react.
Right. Yeah. So I think, and then I might even just ask you if you had to take a bet, would you bet that we are digesting poisonous substances? Let's say some of them that we are actually like, would you bet that we are, or would you bet that we're not, and that it's not true digestion if you're being poisoned by it or something like that?
Um, no, because I think that there's a lot of toxic things that we can get in our food anyway, like the glyphosate issue. Have you heard about that?
I think I just heard about that in terms of GMOs.
Yeah, GMOs, and then there's like glyphosate in particular, I believe refers to like the Roundup, like
Oh, okay.
is it pesticides or
Mm-hmm.
fertilizers possibly? But I have a book called Food Forensics that I absolutely love to read. So I think that we are getting, I mean, I don't know if you could put it in under the general term of poison, but things that aren't good for us. And then I think that it also, like, our body has a way of what's the word I'm looking for? Like soaking up toxins. And they can
Mm-hmm.
even like go like up to the brain and stuff, like aluminum and things like that. So I'm not sure how I would be able to bet on that.
Okay. All right. So that's a bet you can't necessarily make. It
No,
sounds like.
probably not.
Okay. Okay. Something to think about then. Yeah. So this idea of digestion, I think is interesting. I'm thinking, and you did kind of talk about the exception, which is that this isn't universal. There may be some people that because of their digestive systems, they actually can't or shouldn't eat meat, right? I think was
Yeah.
the idea there. Okay. All
Kind of
right. I
similar
think
to like a diabetic that should or should not eat sugar. How
right.
their body is able to kind of process that. But I'm not sure if I'm familiar with any diseases to where you can't eat meat unless it's, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that I mean, I know that it's probably not the best. I guess that if I'm thinking about it, like in terms of the idea of digestion, like I know somebody with heart disease can eat meat, like they'll digest it, but it's not going to be necessarily good for them. It might actually be a
Yeah.
problem for
Yeah.
them, depending on who they are, why they have heart disease and stuff potentially. But I think,
Yeah.
that's one thing. So I can think of things that we can digest that aren't necessarily good for us now that I think about it. Because
Yeah.
meat would be one of those things. It just depends on who you are, right?
Yeah.
But this
Yeah.
this is again the idea that it's most people
Yeah.
potentially. Okay. And then also I was thinking about, for instance, there are certain apes or monkeys that people thought were basically herbivores. And it seems like they can highly digest those, but now we have a lot of recorded footage of them basically cannibalizing. So they will eat each other. It's just a small amount, and it's not known whether or not this is for traditional value, but it is one of those situations where it seems like their bodies can digest the meat, even though it's the nutritional value isn't as known. Like they can eat it and it will digest, but it's not known how much they need it, even though I think there is some speculation that they may be getting some nutritional value from it. Certainly calories.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the aspect of cannibalism, like even if we were to eat other humans, isn't have you ever heard that there's like an addictive quality to that?
I have not, no.
I have heard that once you eat human flesh, you can't, like, it's like addictive. I don't, I could be
Okay.
just I don't know. I hope I didn't dream that and I'm trying to
Hannibal
but
Lecter
I
is
feel
in
like
the
I have
in the chat right now. He's enjoying the show. Yeah, yeah, that I did not I haven't heard about that. I've heard about different diseases that you can get. But that also might be another example actually, is we can technically digest human meat. So the nutritional value, would you agree with that? Would you agree that we can digest human meat? I think.
I'm sure that we probably can, but yeah, as far as the nutritional value or like even the toxicity of it, because I wouldn't want to eat somebody who's uh extremely unhealthy or has like I wonder if you
You want them to be grass-fed
I would
meat?
want them to be organic, yeah, organic
Okay.
grass fed. I
All
wouldn't want
right.
them to be on mushrooms at the time either. Like what if you
Oh
ate
yeah,
them and then yeah, that wouldn't be
that's a good
cool.
idea too. Okay. All right. So then that would be an example. That would be an example of something that we can technically digest it, but its nutritional value is under question. And especially,
Yeah.
I do know that there's a disease that you can get from eating humans too, but I'll let you speak more if you have other things to say about it.
Um No, I haven't heard of a disease that you can get from cannibalism. But as far as the nutritional value, I would imagine that it would have the same qualities as just like a typical meat. But my
Yeah,
guess, because I know different types of meat, like poultry is a little bit healthier, like than red
beef,
meat too. So
right?
I wonder, yeah, I guess it would be like a whole other subset of the meat category. Humans would be.
Yeah, I'll have to ask my girlfriend. She knows for whatever reason more about this than I do. Well, I
Ask
mean,
her
she
if it's
is,
addictive. I swear I've heard that somewhere that once you start eating humans that you can't stop.
I'll ask her. Yeah, she's a scientist, so she knows what you can get from eating humans because there are diseases that are very bad for you if you eat a human that has it, and it's the only way to really get it is by eating a human.
Hmm.
I I have heard that the I've heard two sources. I've heard one, and this is from a fictional source, that human meat has all the nutrients that you need, but I don't believe that. I think I've heard scientific sources saying that it's actually very poor substance for getting what you need. It of course depends on the person that you're eating. Strange conversation going
I
on
know
here
that
now,
there's been
but
an uptick in articles on it lately. Have you seen that? I think the New York Times came out with something, and then there was also another source that had said something about cannibalism
I
too.
have. Yeah, I've heard it becoming more and more popular as an idea, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I wouldn't say that we're meant to eat. I wouldn't say that we're cannibals because we can digest human meat. I guess that would
Okay.
be
I see
my
what you're
rebuttal.
saying. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I think ultimately getting at. But I do think maybe the idea here is still that the nutrition, that
Yeah.
that there's some
I th-
nutrition,
I think
potentially
there's three
nutritional value.
aspects to I think there's three aspects to the discussion on whether or not humans should or should not eat meat. So there's like the morality, and then there's the ability to digest, and then I think that the third one would probably be the nutritional alternative. So
Okay.
like like protein based plants,
Okay.
bugs. Or like, I mean, you could really go pretty deep into this and like even think about like the morality of eating bugs too, because there's still a animal species kind of.
Yeah, I think there's studies coming out showing that some insects feel pain too.
It would be interesting for me to ask a vegan if they would eat bugs, if that would be make a difference for them.
Yeah, and I don't know if I think that has a specific name. I don't know what it is. Maybe you do, but people who eat bugs. But that would be another one. It's just like we could digest bugs. Would we say that we're whatever that phrase is because we can digest them, right?
Yeah.
And then the same idea, like I know fruitarians, I think is what they're called, but they will only eat fruit that has fallen off of a tree, so they won't even pluck a fruit from a tree. And it's one of those things. I feel fine saying this, but like they can digest those fruits, but they're often like spoiled and
Oh
rotten,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
but they can digest it. They can digest it. It's just a tough time for them. So I think
Yeah.
when we're talking about digestion, are we talking about like digesting things, getting the nutrients you need, and like digesting it well?
Mm-hmm.
Are those all concomitant in this idea of
I've
digestion?
heard that I've heard that there's a bigger nutritional value from bananas that are particularly more ripe.
Hmm. Okay.
So I
Yeah.
guess yeah, I mean you're talking about digestion, but yeah, I mean if you wanted to roll nutrition into that too. So
Okay.
I guess that you are influencing my claim a little bit on digestion
Okay.
because
All right.
we can digest things that aren't good for us. So digestion probably doesn't play too big of a role for
Okay.
me.
Yeah.
Any you are influencing my claim on it.
Okay. All right. But I think the nutrition thing is, I think, where we're still gonna
I think that
find.
that yeah, the nutritional yeah, yeah.
Okay. And to be fair too, I think that's probably where vegans or vegetarians would want to have the conversation, would be about, how nutritional are these things? I think. Well,
Probably.
they
Yeah.
would talk about morality, like you said too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that I really don't want to give away my age, but it's a fairly new concept for me because when I was like in high school that I don't even think I knew what the word vegan was or it really didn't seem to come out. So, um yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I knew
Vegetarianism has
that.
always been something, but people weren't very people get it seems like the more time goes on is that people get very defensive about veganism.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I know some vegans myself, associated with some, and they do not take kindly to meat eaters.
Yeah.
Many of them. This
Yeah.
isn't a generalization because I only know a few. But yeah, I
I would be
also
interested to see where that basis comes from and why that came on so quickly in society. But that's kind of yeah, that's interesting to me because it didn't used to be that way. It used to be that you could eat meat and we all kind of lived life fine. You know, you it was vegetarianism and then all of a sudden vegan came in and it was like, ah, you
yeah.
can't eat meat.
Yeah, it's I think you're on the right track with morality when you're talking about morality, so maybe we'll talk about that at some point, but my guess is that if you're going to be a vegetarian and you recognize if your basis is morality, which for many it is, for some it might be nutrition, or my it seems like it needs to be nutritional if we're going to eat it, because that would be the counter moral argument, is like, well, we need it to sustain ourselves. But it's like the fundamental basis is morality, but then the next question becomes like, okay, like you're not eating meat, but you're doing all these other things that are still harming animals, like drinking milk, like these
Yeah.
are still harm. So then it just goes, then veganism was the next natural step from there, it seems like. I think that might be what happened.
Yeah. Um so a little bit on my basis, I actually don't agree with like mass slaughtering of animals. I don't think that I think that if we were able to better like promote local farming, I think that would be better. And I think because I really don't agree with I really don't like it. The idea of like the mass chicken farms and stuff like that. I really don't like that. And I really don't like the idea of what is it? Antibiotic like some people like given hormones, I guess, to them so that they produce more or whatever. I really don't agree with that. So I'm kind of like, you know, my basis of eating meat solely relies on the nutritional value and the fact that I do think that I do think that the human species is omnivores. I don't necessarily flow with the morality of like mass slaughtering of animals and feedlots and stuff like that. I really don't like that. So
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. Yeah. that definitely that. I get excited about lab grown meat, the prospect of lab grown meat. I think that would be a great substitute, but I'm the exact same way. I am I have to admit being a glutton sometimes, so I
Hmm.
will but I don't that doesn't square with me morally. That's
Yeah.
something that I do think if you're going to eat meat, it should be for what you need it for. It should be for the
Yes.
nutritional value.
Yes.
Actually, this is just a little bit, now we're stepping out of the bounds of SE a little bit here, but like, um, and it would be interesting to talk to a vegan because I agree with a lot of what they say. One thing that's
Hmm.
always kind of been in my mind on the topic was so like I've planned my diet like to the T, and it was very hard to create a diet that was low enough in carbohydrates that I didn't have extra body fat without including meat because meat has no carbohydrates. Like it
Yes.
it
Yeah.
has a unique quality in terms of food that other foods just don't have.
Yeah.
Like I think tofu might not have any. Tofu has some carbohydrates in it, but meat's the only one that I think.
Hmm. Meat and I don't think cheese does really, not much. Meat and cheese, like because I know that again, the keto and carb diets were pretty popular too a few years ago, and I love carbs. Like I'm, I love to eat carbs, but I know that they're not good for me, so I try not to. Like if I eat a sandwich, I'll usually just have one piece of bread or things like that, cut down on them. So I know exactly what you're talking about. It's hard to balance out what nutrients you're getting if you're cutting out that meat. So yeah,
Yeah, I'd say that's a big one. I think vegans and vegetarians, from me talking to them, they would say that like you can get a lot of the nutrition that you get from meat in other foods. I think one thing that I've heard is there's certain, and again, this is all just kind of hearsay at this point. I've done some diving, but this was like 5 years ago that I did this research. But like amino acids, I think there's certain amino acids that are in meats that you can't get anywhere else. And then again, my linchpin has always been if you could find me another food that gave me all the amino acids that I
hmm,
needed and the daily protein, but it didn't have carbohydrates, that would probably be the way to convince me, I think, to switch. But
yeah.
yeah, I think
I
that's
just
the
keep
idea.
going back to like a survival type scenario because at that point you wouldn't have supplementation access, like even through like vitamins or like an actual supplement like a pill or whatever,
Yeah.
protein powder. Like in a survival scenario, I try to always kind of think about the native basis of the human species. How did they, if we weren't in an industrialized civilization, how what would we do?
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's just fidgety. The industrialization is fidgety to me. I feel like it could all be like kind of pulled out from us at any given moment. So um, I try not to lean on it. I mean, I obviously I indulge in it, but I try to keep my mindset as back native as possible. So you're correct. I would be interested to see if there's like a natural food source that could give us everything that meat gives us.
Oh yeah, that would be important too. Yeah, a natural food source is what you're
Yeah.
saying now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even like I know for a fact a lot of protein powders still have carbs in them. So
Yeah.
maybe some out there don't, but a lot of them still do have carbs. So that's, not the criteria that we're looking for. Um, yeah. Yeah. So I guess ultimately, and then I do agree with this idea that like, um, to some degree we want to talk about it, but just the fact that what we have now may not be there tomorrow,
Yeah.
and the methods we're going to rely on, I think, the history of our hunter gatherer nature, right? And really that just being an aspect of how we developed biologically to some degree.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next piece of information was that we have teeth for eating meat, right? And that those are sharp. I think that was it. I guess I just put words in your mouth. I didn't mean to do that. But it's the idea that we have like canines, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I always try to think back to like the idea of dinosaurs because that's how
Mm,
you're supposed to learn how to identify who a carnivore or herbivore is by looking at their teeth. And I think that if you could just glance at a human's teeth, you can see that the canines are obviously present. And I think that those serve a purpose.
okay. All right, yeah. So if we have teeth for eating meat, or if we have these sharp teeth that we can identify in dinosaurs and know they eat meat, they're carnivores or omnivores at the very least, then it seems like humans are omnivores, right? If we're having those
Yeah.
same features. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense to me. Um, this is actually something that so there are creationist arguments. There are arguments among creationists where this is often cited to fundamentalist creationists, let's say, that there's this idea of the Adam and Eve in the garden, and this idea that animals really weren't made to eat each other. They weren't made to be violent against each other. When we ate the fruit, humanity fell along with everything else. And so that's what started carnivorism. That's the idea behind it.
Hmm.
But I'm saying all that to say that a creationist may look at this and say, well, so for instance, there's a bat. If you look at certain bats, bats have sharp teeth, but some of them only
Mm,
eat fruits. And so they would offer that as a counterexample. And so I wonder what response you might have to that or what your thoughts are on that.
yeah, that does make my claim a little bit less. Because you're right. There are, I think that, um, yeah, there's probably even aside from bats, there's probably another set of animals too that have sharp teeth that are not um, carnivores. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that
I think that's interesting too. I think one thing that maybe we could agree that we'd want to find here, I would want to know how many there are compared
uh
to not, right? Does that seem intuitive there?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like we would want
I could
to,
probably talk forever about the ideals of Adam and Eve too. Because yes, the eating of the apple was supposed to be like a point where the duality came in, to where there was no absence of evil, and so that would explain a lot in regards to animals eating themselves. Because if you were going to live on a in a society where duality wasn't present and everything was within, like, heavenly light and love, and you didn't have that difference in good and bad, you probably wouldn't have a means for survival to eat another species
right. Yeah. Yeah.
because you
And
wouldn't be
again,
able to, yeah, you wouldn't be able to take something else's life, like even on a karmic aspect for me.
yeah, it makes sense to me on an intuitive or in kind of like, yeah, superficial sense. But
Yeah, I just wonder if that was the case, then how would we where would we how would we eat?
I think the idea, and again, I'm not a creationist, so I'm
Mhm.
speaking from people I've heard, but I think the idea is that we actually sustained on like God's power and light. And
Yeah.
that when we ate the apple, God was separated from us so we can no longer get sustenance from that source. And
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
so then the question becomes, okay, if that's the case, and if dinosaurs were there in the Garden of Eden, why did they have sharp teeth? And then the rebuttal to that is, well, you can have sharp teeth and not be a carnivore. That's the
Yeah.
rebuttal to that. I still think that that's, you know, again, and this is just kind of like I guess my own view at this point, but that's a little convincing. I think like it is for you too.
Hmm.
But I want to know how many animals have sharp teeth that aren't carnivores. Because if it's a
Yeah.
small percentage, then you could still infer as a pretty good rule of thumb that if an animal has sharp teeth, that
Yeah.
it's for devouring meat.
Yes. Like on a statistical basis. Yes,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then also you could kind of go back to our digestive conversation and be like, can a bat digest? I
Mm.
mean, is that just something that they can't do, or do they just choose not? What would happen hypothetically if a fruit bat ate meat?
Yeah, that's a good question too, I
Would it
think.
kill them?
Yeah,
So
and then also like when we're talking about the digestive system, the first thing that we talk about is kind of chewing, isn't it? It's
yeah,
mastication and
yep,
our saliva. That's another thing. Like
yes,
what enzymes our salivas kind of create, or what do they break down? I
yeah.
think is something.
Or like even outside of the human species, like does that play a role in different animals too? Because I might be thinking of cows again with their stomachs, but I feel like there's different animals that their saliva does play a role in what their diets are.
Yeah,
Um, the instinctive abilities of different animals in the animal kingdom is a really great point of interest to me because I'm not sure if I've ever told you the example of like how a spider web or a spider instantly knows how to um, build a web without anybody teaching it. It's just fascinating to me that certain animals are able to know what's poison and what's not without having any teachings
yeah, yeah. I
or
mean,
what they're able to digest, I guess, or what they're supposed to eat.
yeah, yeah. That's a good question. That I know that animals do sometimes eat what they're not supposed to eat, and they will die from that. Or some animals will run off cliffs and they'll die from that. Um, but like one thing that I can kind of speak on with this or whatever is like, if there are two animals that are like highly related to one another, and I don't know, maybe I can't talk about this too much. I'm thinking about berries and how like um you can
Oh
adapt the
yeah,
ability
yeah, mm-hmm.
to like see different color berries. And then so there's
Yeah,
two berries that if somebody else can't see that they're actually two different hues of blue, that can cause one of them to eat the poisonous berry. But if you can tell the difference and you know which one is which, it seems like there does have to be some learning mechanism in there, right?
yes. Or like a bear, like a bear in the mountains. How do they know? Or are they just are certain types of berries just not poisonous to them?
Oh, that's a good question too. Yeah.
The animal knowledge is amazing. The instinctive knowledge that they have is amazing, and even though the humans are known to be like the most I mean, I guess we're self-aware and consciousness and stuff, but we're supposed to be the most intelligent species. I don't know. Animals are pretty smart, instinctively smart. They know. So it fascinates me.
Yeah, and I think that might be where the vegans or the vegetarians would start chiming in and say, yeah, so then what
Yeah.
makes you different? Like, why do
Yeah.
we deserve to eat them and they don't get to live type deal? Which, and
Yeah.
again, it's like, I think we both understand it. Yeah. I
Yeah. Yeah.
think
I don't I
morally,
and I
but
really don't think that I mean, and I really think that a lot of people would probably agree with our point that mass slaughtering of animals just for human food consumption is not great. It's not ideal. But also there's this in society, it's I guess not frowned upon, but it's really not promoted to do because everybody has to work their 9 to 5 jobs and everybody has to make money. You don't get a lot of money from small time farming.
that's
So there's
true.
societal implications that kind of fall into it too.
Yeah, so it just might not be easy to accomplish,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean I guess it's not worth trying. On your point, really quick, I guess before we move on to some of your other points, one would be pigeons. I've heard pigeons, they travel ridiculously long. Birds, I think, in general, are going to be a good example, but I guess pigeons in particular travel like really long distances. And people who study pigeons don't know why. They don't know how
Mm.
they can get from one very specific location to another one, even if some of these birds they don't make the trek themselves. Some insects as well. They don't. It's not like they go there and then come back. So they're following their parents and learning the direction. They just instinctively know
Yeah.
how to get to their mating ground, and then they die there, or
Yeah.
they come back and they die, and then their kids just know.
Yeah.
So it is
Yeah.
strange.
I've heard a lot about pigeons. Yeah. And like they like messenger pigeons, I guess. They can send messages to people. And then um there's a place in Oklahoma City that's really interesting. It's like a I would have to look it up, but it's like a little place where there's pigeons, or like I don't know if they do experiments like within that frame or not, but it's really interesting. It's in Oklahoma City. But yeah,
Hmm.
I've heard a lot about pigeons, and then crows are also very intelligent.
Yeah, and ravens as well.
Yeah. Birds
Yeah,
are in general, because then you can go and like parrots can even talk, learn how to talk. That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Ravens are apparently adapting to even speed limits. So like they're able to tell how traffic is running. Like they've evolved the ability to tell when to go and not to avoid cars, whereas before they couldn't do that. So
Wow.
they're I've heard about ravens, like they will watch a fisherman or a person who catches fish tie like a very complex knot in
Oh
fishing
yes,
line,
yeah. Hmm.
and then the raven or the I can't remember if it's a raven or a crow will come down and literally unpick it in that sequence to get the food. And
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy.
It's funny on the basis of evolution, right? Like how those raven like the ravens would evolve like that. And then like you could probably even think about the humans evolving too. Except for the
Hmm.
fact that the industrialization could be pulled from us. I think that if we had like a concrete way to know that industrialization in society wasn't going to get pulled from us or couldn't get pulled from us, we would evolve more quickly. So like even
Yeah.
like within like the transhumanism or evolving with machines.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I think that would be an interesting claim too. I'm not I'm not a doomer, but I just don't know. I
Yeah.
guess that's where I
It's
end
not
up.
it's not concrete enough for me.
Right.
Especially I think if we had I think if we could move forward with the free energy, or allow more concepts of energy to come through besides the natural resource oils and stuff like that. I think if we could I think if we had the free energy basis, I think that we could be more concrete in the industrialized civilization and be more confident in that, to where we would be able to evolve much quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I agree with that. Yeah. I guess it'd be interesting to see how we evolve, but yeah, definitely I don't take what we have now for granted. I don't
Yeah.
think that this is guaranteed at all. I think
Yeah.
the industrial movement is very young, and like
Yeah.
historically speaking, if you look at all the animals that have ever existed, 99.9 plus of them have gone extinct.
Yeah.
So we're just for that
Yeah.
0.0001%. And the same thing with societies. The vast majority of human societies that ever
Hmm.
existed have gone away or
There's
collapsed.
there's a lot of theories that society has collapsed quite a few times, actually, like within recent history. Have you ever heard of the mud flood theory? We're kind of getting way off topic on conversation, but the mud flood
It's all
theory
right.
is very interesting.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up. I know of flood theories. Like I know of like huge geographical pieces of land flooding, and that's where I usually assume we get flood myths from. But I don't know if it's the same thing or something that's different.
Yeah, the mud flood theory is you could it's a big rabbit hole you can go down, but it was like basically not too far under the ground. There's a lot of artifacts that have been found that seem like they might date really far back, but they're actually quite recent.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely look that up. Yeah, that again, I don't know. I'm not a doomer, so I don't assume that society is going to collapse. I just don't know, and I don't think that's a good spot to be in either.
Yeah. I
I
think
don't
if we
think
had more
not,
confidence, we would be able to evolve much
yeah,
quicker.
like if somebody came to your house that was like an expert on how to build houses or stuff, and they were like, we're not saying your house is gonna burn down. we're just saying we're not sure, you
Yeah.
wouldn't be like, oh, that's great, everything's fine. Let's keep
Yeah.
going then.
Yeah.
Um, okay, all right, sorry for the deviation there, but I can make that a separate video, I think, so that'll be fine. Let's go to history. This idea of history, and maybe we can even lump it in with the idea of ecosystems. But it seems like we have this history of eating meat. We have this history of kind of being at this certain place in the ecosystem. Therefore, we're omnivores. Is that the reasoning behind that too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then the practice is, can we think of anything that historically we ate, but we no longer eat, and we know why we don't eat that thing? Or historically we haven't eaten, and now we do eat it, and we're fine with that. And we don't kind of necessarily label ourselves one or the other because of what we did or didn't eat in the past.
Hmm. I'm probably not knowledgeable enough to really know. But I think that, I mean, whether or not you're religious, you can kind of probably look back at some of the writings in the Bible to see what they're talking about. They do talk a lot about bread. Do they talk about, oh, they do. I don't know much about the Bible. I don't know if they
They
talk
talk
about
about
like,
not eating shellfish. Like there's things that they say don't eat,
and pork. I'm not sure if
and
that's in the
pork.
Bible, but there are certain religions
Hmm.
that don't like to eat pork.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the Bible has a lot of rules when it comes to food. So, but yeah, those are a couple. Shellfish is one. I think pork might be one in one section, in one part, but I mean, you're not supposed to eat like I think you're not supposed to eat like any double hooved animals. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up. Maybe it's single hooved, but it has to do with their
Hmm.
hooves. You can't, if you see an animal with a certain type of hoof, you can't eat it, apparently. Uh,
See, that's yeah, I think the Bible or like religious writings or scriptures would probably be a good place to look back in history. Or like I guess maybe if you could think of like ancient Egyptian stuff, or even I guess maybe cavemen.
yeah, I think we could do even more than that because we can. So, for instance, we know that there were certain areas of the world that didn't have access to certain foods. It took a connection with that society
Oh yeah.
before they could get those certain foods or even spices. Like, so like chocolate would be a great one, or
Hmm.
like anything
Or I
from
think that
the.
there's something like that regarding why Asian people eat a lot of rice too, because it was like cheap and really accessible.
Hmm. Yeah, and so there are going to be certain cultures that didn't have access to certain type of foods.
Yeah.
So historically, they won't have an association with eating the food. I think milk would be actually a big one because there are a lot of
Hmm.
cultures that didn't have access to milk. Um, and actually, how is that? I think there's something about um, Northern European countries. What was it? I'm gonna butcher this, but it's like they didn't have as much sun as people who were
Oh,
closer to the equator. And so I think they didn't have like vitamin C, so it wasn't vitamin D that they needed.
scurvy.
Yeah, like they had to supplement what they weren't getting from the sun with certain foods.
Hmm.
It seems like that might be too unrelated. I think that ultimately the idea is, oh, this is where like lactose intolerance comes from. The idea is that there were certain cultures that didn't have access. They lacked the lactase enzyme, which breaks down lactose. So because they don't have that, uh, they can't eat it. So it seemed like if there were certain cultures that didn't eat meat after a duration of time, they might lose the ability to digest the meat properly.
Gosh, I uh I don't know how vegans get their nutrients. I can't imagine not being able to get the calcium content from milk.
Hmm. I mean, I don't drink milk myself, but I do drink. almond milk, which I think still has, maybe they can put calcium in it or already has it in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I've
don't
never tried
know.
it, but yeah. Um,
But it might also come
I'm
down to the
just
genetics.
that's true, but um I just wonder if without supplementation, if there could be an actual like if you could speak to like a physician or a medical doctor and see like without any type of supplementation, is veganism healthy for your body? To not
Mm,
have any of that nutrition from those food sources. So my claim is getting a little bit stronger for me, a little bit.
okay.
Just on speaking on this particular aspect in the topic, my claim's getting a little stronger in the fact that not anti-veganism, because I mean I understand where they're coming from, but on a health basis, from the nutritional basis. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think ultimately what it's going to come down to, not ultimately, I can't say ultimately, but I feel like to a large degree it's going to come down to the individual. Because like I know, for instance, there are studies, that's going to be one issue, is that there are going to be a multitude of studies and they're going to indicate different things. I've kind of already been down this nutrition rabbit hole, but for instance, if you do studies in America of like meat eaters, there's a direct correlation between people who eat meat and people who get heart disease later in life. This is a pretty clear trend. This trend goes away if you look in some European countries. So they can be eating the same amount of meat and not develop any heart issues. And so ultimately, it might come down to genetics, which we
mm,
can't, you can't know by looking at a vegan or somebody who eats meat what their genetics is, but it might ultimately come down to what is your body type like and what does your genetics indicate you should be eating. And maybe that is some meat, maybe that is no meat. Maybe their body, for some people, I would almost bet there are some people out there that can't eat meat. I don't know exactly why that would be, but
yeah.
um
I think you would probably have to factor in like the cortisol and stress as well,
oh
as
yeah.
far as heart problems would go.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, yeah, I wonder if that was absent, if that would make a difference, like within like a control group.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the hard thing, is accommodating for different populations and
Hmm.
just different conditions. But there are, so it was related to, um like there are certain places near the equator where their diets consist mostly of meat. So they are mostly meat eaters. They're still hunting and they eat that meat and they don't have that issue. And that could come down to stress level. Maybe they're less stressed.
Yeah,
Um, but
they're not very industrialized over there. They don't have like, you know, they're
yeah, the
kind of more free
congestion
living.
maybe. Yeah. Yeah. So, but then also they're constantly more open to the elements as well. So
That's
it's
true.
so it's hard to put a pin on that one. But that does, when I look at diet studies, that seems to be what it centers around. The idea that really diets, we can make general claims like, humans are omnivores, and that might be true to a certain degree or even a high degree, but ultimately we would need to look at uh kind of your genetics or your history and how those genetics play out in reality to know maybe what you should be eating. That's the general sense I've got. So yeah. Yeah, so then that's our, so I think the last piece of information you made there was kind of questioning how vegans get their nutrients.
Yeah.
Okay. Get nutrients, or maybe the fact that they have to take supplements.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I do want to say I do know that there are vegans out there who take supplements. And
See, I don't think, I mean, I'm not saying that again, I really want to reiterate that I'm not trying to poop on anybody's beliefs or, like judge anybody for the way they live their life. But if you're having to take supplements to supplement for the things that you aren't eating,
Yeah,
based on my initial claim that we're omnivores, or that scientifically we are, it just that point right there just really kind of it kind of furthers my claim, gives me a
got
little
you.
more confidence in it.
So you might even say, like in some circumstances, like with some people, especially if they're taking supplements, like you are a herbivore in an omnivore's body, kind of like that deal. Like it's
Yeah, yeah.
like you're not a practicing omnivore, but you're the fact that you have to get these
Yeah,
nutrients from other things maybe indicates that you need it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of
And
like, I mean, you could probably kind of make a correlation to like a transsexual needing to take hormones to be a female or
mm,
male.
hmm
A vegan would need to take supplements to be
to
healthy,
be vegan.
possibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, let's go back really quick to the history just one more time because I was kind of making this comparison of there are certain cultures who like didn't have access to certain things in their diet, but now they eat them just fine, and that doesn't necessarily indicate that they shouldn't be eating it. Or, like I'm thinking I'm trying really hard to think of I think farming might be one example. Like at one point we weren't farmers, and it's not like people who started farming were like necessarily eating things that they shouldn't, even though that wasn't their history. We have a hunter-gatherer past, but that doesn't mean we have to eat that same way in the future, I think is ultimately my point.
And I think again that industrialization kind of plays a big role in that, because you have to export and import those things. Um, because I think that America is a little spoiled in the fact that we have all types of fruit and vegetables all year round, when typically that wouldn't be the case if we weren't able to import that from other countries.
Right.
So, um, yeah, I think that the access to foods makes a difference,
Okay.
via being able to import and export. So I guess it would kind of go back to my basis of natural.
Okay.
How natural is the diet? Because I guess maybe it could also play within the genetics of each culture, or yeah, I think that possibly genetics would play a role in the different types of people from those cultures. Like possibly Asians would be more, have a less higher threshold for certain nutrients, or wouldn't need as much to thrive. And I think that what was the country that you said? Ethiopia?
I don't I think it's just cultures
I
near
think
the equator.
near the
Yeah.
equator. Um, I think that skin color would play a big role, because I think that the darker your skin tone, the less the harder it is for your body to absorb vitamin D.
Right.
So you would need extra supplement in that. So they would need a natural source for that. If you were thinking hypothetically off the lines of like the industrial, like importing and exporting, what would they have around them that would give them that vitamin D that they need?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Um, so I think one discussion topic and then one question is all I really have, maybe a couple more questions, but one would be like the idea of like blue zones. So those are usually Asian countries, I think, maybe not. But their diet is like still has meat in it because it's fish, and then some poultry. Definitely not beef though. And then some grains and some vegetables, a little bit of fruit. And those cultures, and this is, correlation, but not necessarily causation, but people tend to be healthier in those areas and live
Mm,
longer. And so, if anything, I think was going to be convincing to us about what was right for every
mm-hmm.
human, it might be something like that.
Yeah.
Um, though I'm not sure.
But
Yeah, I
there
think
is, I mean, there is animal protein in that. So yeah.
right. Yeah. It is still limited too, so we could talk about the overconsumption of meat, which is a
Yep.
problem too. But
Yeah. And I've heard more often than not that red meat isn't as healthy for you as, like I had said, poultry and fish.
yeah, yeah,
So
I've heard a lot of that too. So
yeah.
and maybe that's kind of like the common ground. But final question: if we had a sufficient natural substitute, then I think I already know the answer. But if we had that sufficient natural substitute that had all the same properties as meat but wasn't meat, do you do you think we should be eating that instead, or would that change your confidence, I think, in this claim?
I think so. I think it would probably, yeah, it would probably increase my or fluctuate my confidence to the vegan level, especially if it was natural, not lab grown, something natural that we could have that would substitute all the nutrients that we could get from meat. Um, because yeah, I can only I'm gonna I've said it a couple times, but like on a survival basis, I can't see myself being able to survive on foraging alone. I would probably, even if I did turn to veganism, I would probably have to resort back. Um, and I would probably have to start hunting in as a means of survival. And I just know and I grew up on a big farm, so I'm really desensitized to that kind of stuff. But again, I'm going to reiterate that I don't like the mass slaughter of animals. But I do know the concept of the food chain. I do know the concept of hunting. So I would
Okay.
probably have to do that as a means of survival if I had to.
Okay. All right. That sounds good on that then. Um, yeah, I do know that there are a lot of philosophers that are vegan, and I find that interesting. You know, I think that the industrial argument is an important one to consider. I do ultimately think that if I had substitute meat or lab grown meat, I would be fine with that.
Mm.
But if that got taken away, then I would totally go back to, I would,
Yeah,
yeah, resort to primitive means, I guess. Um, okay, so, and I think I already know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway, just because it's on the list. But so if this information starts to change, my guess is that your confidence would change. If we found out, for instance, that the teeth that we have for that we think are for eating meat were actually designed for a different purpose, that might start to persuade you a little bit. Um,
possibly. Yeah. Or
okay.
if like you could show like an um advancing of decay or something that meat would bring on
I
to the
was gonna bring that
enamel.
up. I was gonna bring that up and I forgot because I think that might be something that some dentists might say is that's a
Yeah.
problem with meat rotting in your teeth as well.
Yeah.
So that could be something as well. Yeah, yeah, great that you brought that up. We talked about digestion and the issues with the idea of digestion, or like what's being digested exactly, and in what ways are can you poison yourself and something still be digested? Um, and then this idea of history and how there's genetic components. Um, but maybe if we looked back in history and we found out that we actually didn't eat as much meat as we thought we did, maybe if that started to come to light, that might start to change some things. Okay. All right, so then let's just revisit the confidence and then I can reveal my own. So now at the end of the conversation, you started with 78%. How confident would you say you are in the claim now?
It's probably gotten a little higher.
Okay. All right.
I'm probably gonna go with about an 83.
An 83. All right, that's great. Um, so I'll just go ahead and share mine now. So I started at a 99%.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty
Oh,
confident that we're omnivore. I think just like biologically,
yeah.
that's how we classify it. It seems pretty hard. It's like I'm always looking for expert consensus. And I am fairly certain that if I talk to a majority of biologists or even anthropologists, I'm pretty sure a high amount are going to say, and I could be wrong about this, but they're going to say that we're traditionally omnivores. I think that they're going to say that. That did lessen a little bit, I think, with the conversation about genetics and, you
Mm,
know, different people potentially
hmm.
require. There's something in particular you said that I can't remember that made me think like, oh yeah, it might be way more genetic than we might initially realize.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, okay. Um, Anything else? Any other final thoughts about this? Thank you for doing this with me. I appreciate it.
I
Um,
appreciate you having me back on. It was really fun. I liked it. Um, no, I don't think I think that that was a really good conversation. I think we were both able to really kind of spin our wheels a little bit and think about like our claims to
yeah,
what it is and stuff. So I think that was good. I liked it.
yeah, I did too. Yeah, I thought that that was really well thought out and well thought through. It would be
Yeah.
interesting to, let's acknowledge here that we just have we're just two perspectives on this issue, and that ideally we would want to talk to vegans or vegetarians and hear them
Yes.
out, what's your
Yeah.
information? I think morality is where the things will start to find a lot of common ground there, which I think is good. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also important to mention that it takes a certain set of people to be able to discuss this logically. Because if you have like certain huge extreme opposition to it, it's hard to have a productive conversation about it unless you can put those beliefs aside and really speak. So I think it was beneficial that you and I have a common belief in the beginning in the first place.
yeah. Yeah, and we haven't had common beliefs before, and I think that's gone well too. But yeah, you have to have a certain disposition, and just to be fair here, I think is actually what I want to do and say that like I can like, so for instance, imagine if we were talking about cannibalism and somebody's family had been devoured by other humans, right? And we're
Yeah.
arguing about cannibalism. It's just like, if you think that those animals are suffering and you don't see them as different than us, then I can understand why it would be upsetting to you to talk about that with other people.
Yeah.
Um, so I totally understand the emotion. I understand why people get emotional about it. I just it's not going to convince me if you're yelling at me that I shouldn't be eating meat. And if you can yell at me in argument, if you yell an argument at me, I will listen to you. Even if you're yelling at me, I will still do
I
it.
won't. I won't.
Yeah, yeah. Some people want to, and you can
I
understand that too,
won't.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you can understand that because you're having an emotional reaction to how they're
Yeah.
behaving, right? But to
Yeah.
me, it's just like if they're yelling, if they're screaming at me, and it's a good argument, I'll be like, okay, I would still accept it. Um,
I guess that the emotional motivation behind it would maybe make me listen a little bit. If they were like really passionate about it, I would have to kind of switch to their perspective and see why it mattered so much to them. So I guess yeah, I can see that.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I think another thing that's kind of been revealed in the conversation, which I will admit is my bias, and I think is your bias too to some degree, but it's just like we're not, and we also almost we tiptoed around this conversation, but like um this obsession with eating humans, and that like I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would actually in some circumstances be okay with that, depending on the circumstance.
I don't know. I possibly, but I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe not because then, like, I think that I would have to probably take into consideration whatever it was that you mentioned about some sort of disease, and then my contention
Hmm.
on it being addictive because I am like
Oh
not for
yeah.
anything that's addictive at all. So you
Gotcha.
need to definitely make sure that you ask your girlfriend about that
I
and
will. I'll do that.
um keep me updated with what she says because I'm interested.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. She talks about it fairly often enough that I'm like, okay, yeah, yeah. I kind of even forget it. But in the like, they don't have that disease, and you're on a mountain, and there's just no other way to get nutritional value, and that person's already dead, so you're not going to murder
Oh, if they're
anybody.
already dead, yeah, maybe
Yeah.
that also makes it better. I would never murder anybody. And
Right.
I don't know because I've had this conversation with my husband before and I don't think I could. I don't think I could
Yeah.
eat him. I would probably I would probably I've done enough research on foraging that I could probably survive without it eating him.
Okay.
I would probably do like I would still have to do like a ceremony and like properly dispose of his body some way. I don't think I could eat him or my children. I don't think I could eat my children either.
Yeah, I think children would be a tough one. I could totally eat other people, but
Yeah.
children I think would be a yeah.
If it was somebody who I didn't know,
Yeah, that might be different too.
yeah, it'd be
Yeah, it's just
different.
weird to talk about, right? It's
Yeah.
weird to
It's
say.
weird that there's a lot of sources coming out talking about it though. So,
I I think we have an obsession as a we're testing the moral boundaries. We're wondering
mhm,
like, well, we eat meat already as a
yeah.
species, so what about that other meat that you know, like that's just kind of where our mind goes.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I do think, one thing that I've always found compelling in terms of an argument that convinces me on this position is that, like, so the idea is that we're harming animals by eating them, but we actually have a potential, in my view, as a species to help animals in a way that they don't have the capacity to help us, at least consciously, as much. So we
Mhm.
could conceivably fix a lot of the ethical issues behind eating meat, but a bear will tear you up. Like so
Right.
many
Yes.
animals are not going to think twice about devouring you and
Yeah.
doing anything that they need to
Yeah.
survive and get what they need for their
That's a
bodies.
good point. Yeah, that is a good point for
Yeah, so
sure.
it's just like, if I eat enough meat and I'm strong and healthy, then I can advocate on behalf of animals and reduce their suffering.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm not getting the nutrients that I need, I might not be able to do that as well. But
Yeah.
maybe I just like meat. Maybe I just like eating meat and I'm a
I
selfish
really
person.
like meat. I've got a pound of
Yeah.
bacon that I'm getting ready to cook for dinner. I'm excited.
All
So,
right. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you for talking to me today, Natasha. And
you're
then
welcome.
and then I'll see you on Sunday.
Yes.
All right. Oh,
Thank
one
you.
more thing. I have to start like saying it now, I guess, because it's like a thing. If I find any studies that this is different, but like, subscribe, comment, I guess maybe it increases the chances that people will push those buttons. So if it does, then I'll say it. I really hate saying it, but I'll do it for now until I learn differently.
Yes.
But all right, Natasha. Nice talking to you
Bye.
again. Bye.
Bye.